Thanks for joining today, everybody. My name is Heather Curtis, and I'm the Communications Advisor with Affordable Housing and Homelessness at the City of Edmonton. So we will get started. I just want to go over some logistics. So we'll do our presentation, and then we will have time for Q&As at the very end. So if you can save your questions till the end, there's a little icon on the bottom right. It's like 3 little shapes. You can access the Q&A there. Feel free to add in your questions throughout the presentation, though. We will just get to them at the end. So now I will turn it over to Rachael, and she will introduce herself as well.
Thank you, Heather, and thanks everyone for joining us today. This is like my worst nightmare. I'm having some technical difficulties and my camera has a little red dot on it and I cannot turn it on. So I apologize. You're gonna have to look at the little bop of my face, the little picture. But my name is Rachael Putt and my pronouns are she, her. I'm the manager of housing policy and homelessness in the Affordable Housing and Homelessness section here at the City of Edmonton. And I just wanna say thanks again for joining us over your busy schedules and over your lunch hour today. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the land that I'm speaking to you from today here in Treaty 6 territory. I'm very fortunate as a settler to call Amiskogi, Wiskaikigan my home. After many moves across this country, relationships and community are ultimately the driving force that helped me decide to raise my tornado of a toddler here in Edmonton. This territory is the home and gathering place for diverse Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Inuit, and many others. I continue to learn about the importance of treaty and our collective responsibility to Indigenous communities and appreciate that only in partnership can we create the social change necessary to end homelessness. I also understand access to affordable and adequate housing to be a cornerstone of reconciliation in our country. And it's in this spirit of collaboration and joint purpose that I join you today. So in the presentation today, I'm going to provide an overview of the city's homelessness and housing services plan, which outlines the way in which the City of Edmonton contributes to efforts of the homeless serving system of care with consideration of the roles and responsibilities of all orders of government, allied systems of care like health services, and the critical contributions of community-based organizations who deliver services and housing supports for people experiencing homelessness. I do suspect that there are a combination of folks who are a part of different systems and representative of different organizations on this call today. So just want to take a moment to thank you so much for all of your work. And if you would like to connect following the presentation to offer any feedback or just to chat, I welcome those conversations. So please don't hesitate to reach out. To begin, I'm just going to provide a bit of an overview on Edmonton's current state of homelessness and housing need and a little bit of historical context about how we got here. We often hear that Edmonton is already an affordable city, and if you're a prospective homeowner, Edmonton's housing market is relatively attractive, particularly when compared to other large Canadian cities. In Edmonton right now, someone earning the median income can just afford the purchase price of the average resale home. Yet this story obscures the reality experienced by a significant portion of households in our city, including the tens of thousands of people who struggle to afford their rent and those facing year-long wait lists for affordable housing. For these Edmontonians, home ownership is impossible. So from one angle, housing in Edmonton is attractive and attainable, and surely that's what you read in news headlines. But on the other, we know that the housing system and housing market in our city faces significant gaps. And so homelessness in our community and what you see outside is really only the tip of the iceberg. We know that for every person experiencing homelessness, there's approximately 100 people just barely getting by and on the verge of tipping into homelessness. And you folks will probably be familiar with the next slide, which is a screen cap of Home or Trust by Name list that helps to provide some additional context. So according to the BNL, over 4,600 people are experiencing homelessness in November 2024. The by name list is representative of people who are experiencing homelessness and accessing housing services. During their intake, individuals are asked to identify where they sleep most often. 861 of those individuals identify as staying in shelter, 1,547 identify as unsheltered, and 2,285 identify as being provisionally accommodated, meaning they lack permanent tenancy. Of the 2,408 people who are sheltered or unsheltered, 14% are 24 years old or younger, 54% identify as Indigenous, and 43% are women. As a result of inflation, a growing population, and already oversubscribed affordable housing supply, tightening vacancy rates, and increasing rents, the inflow into homelessness outpaces the resources available to address the need. At the same time, the chronicity and complexity of health needs in Edmonton's homeless population is growing due to a number of factors, including the contaminated street drug supply and rising rates of mental health concerns, which drives the need for more supportive housing options, in addition to housing programs that provide wraparound or outreach supports, such as health, social, and financial services. Right now, 1 in 8 households, 1 in 4 renters, and 1 in 3 Indigenous renter households are in core housing need, meaning they pay more than they can afford in housing costs, or live in crowded or unsafe conditions and can't afford to move. The number of households in core housing need in Edmonton has been on the rise since 2005. By 2026, it is expected to increase to 59,000 households, the highest since the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation began tracking in 1990. In the face of those 1 in 4 and 1 in 8 numbers, we have a significant shortfall in affordable housing. Only 1 in 24 homes in Edmonton are available to meet the demand for affordable housing, which is a massive gap, and without increased investment will surely grow. But I think it's important to note how we got here before we start talking about solutions. So the chart on the screen from the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation shows the number of social rental housing units built in Canada between 1972 and 2010. From the 1960s to the 80s, there was significant investment in affordable housing from all levels of government, most of which can be seen on this graph. In fact, most of Edmonton's current social housing stock is from this era, properties managed by organizations like City and Homeward. But this chart really points to a common theme in Canadian cities. In the early 90s, government investment in affordable housing dropped dramatically. The federal government passed the responsibility onto provinces and the investment shrank. And we've been trying to recover ever since. Some would argue, many folks indeed, would argue that this was the beginning of Canada's homelessness crisis. And as I mentioned before, it's often said that Edmonton is an affordable place to live, which is true if you're making an average or above average income. It's relatively affordable compared to Vancouver or Toronto, but as we saw, it's a completely different story for many renters and households. This graph shows you a glimpse into why that is, in part. This is the history of housing construction in Edmonton since 1990, with each bar representing a year. And what you'll notice is the red on the bars, which is a relative proportion of rental stock built over time in Edmonton, being extremely low. And I promise this is the last graph. On this graph, you'll see some federal data on the number of affordable housing units by province across Canada. In 2021, Edmonton had 14,837 affordable and social housing units. And remember that most of Edmonton's inventory was built prior to 1990, and more than half of these units are either bachelor or one-bedroom units. Along with Quebec, Alberta has the fewest number of affordable housing units per capita in the country. There's only 1 unit of affordable housing for every 108 residents in Alberta. The national average is 1 unit per 56 residents. Along with the last couple of slides, these statistics illustrate the vulnerability and risk of Edmonton's affordable housing inventory. We have a combination of insufficient supply, aging structures, and limited capacity within these units. So the question is, what is the City of Edmonton doing about it? In 2020, the City of Edmonton created the City Plan, which outlines the choices we need to make to become a healthy, urban, and climate-resilient city of 2 million people that supports a prosperous region. Part of this means ensuring our city is inclusive and compassionate, which means we're rooted in concepts and efforts to improve equity and poverty, eliminate racism, and make clear progress towards truth and reconciliation. The City Plan's goals around homelessness and affordable housing are simple but ambitious. No chronic or episodic homelessness in Edmonton, nobody in core housing need. These goals are critical to achieving other equity goals. It's difficult to imagine progress on reconciliation and anti-racism if we fail to do whatever we can to meet the most basic needs that we all share of everyone in our community. Core housing need is fundamentally a form of poverty, and homelessness is its most extreme form. The most significant lever available to municipalities in Canada to reduce poverty is increasing the supply of affordable and supportive housing. So in keeping with a bit of the historical context from the previous graphs, the City of Edmonton's role in affordable housing has shifted and changed over time. Like the federal government and the province, the city built social housing from the 60s to the 80s. The city still owns roughly 2,000 units of social housing, and we're working with other orders of government to renew and bring this social housing up to date. In the 1990s, the city moved away from developing and operating affordable housing and shifted towards supporting the affordable housing sector. And as homelessness grew in the 2000s, Edmonton developed its first community plan to end homelessness in 2009, which resulted from a number of contributions from different order of government, community-based organizations and individuals in our community. At the same time, the city's role moved away from directly building social housing to funding partners who are building affordable housing. And for the most part, this has meant leveraging block funding from the provincial government and then investing that in the creation of new affordable housing units and the renovation and subsidy of other units. Today, this role has changed once again. Through the Affordable Housing Investment Plan, which was approved in 2022 by City Council under the city's previous affordable housing strategy, the city acts as the first-in investor for affordable housing so that housing providers can leverage municipal funds to access funding from other orders of government. Through a predictable and reliable funding framework, the city has invested $254 million in affordable housing to help create 5,553 units, including 916 units of supportive housing. This is more than double the affordable housing units created in the 10 years prior to 2019. Pictured on the screen are the 3 new supportive housing developments coming to Holyrood, Kenora, and Garneau neighborhoods in Edmonton. And supportive housing, as you know, is critical social infrastructure that will help to prevent and end homelessness in Edmonton. Without it, people with complex health needs who are experiencing homelessness are more likely to remain unhoused. Since 2023 alone, the city has also invested approximately $121 million in funding and $4 million in land contributions to support 2,879 units of affordable housing through the Affordable Housing Investment Program, or AHIP. AHIP provides grant funding to eligible nonprofits and private sector entities, targeting shovel-ready proposals to encourage affordable housing development in Edmonton. The city recently granted $19.2 million in funding to support 5 new affordable housing sites, 1 supportive housing site, and 1 transitional housing site that will result in the construction of 297 units of affordable housing in Edmonton. With these units, the city will surpass the original target of 2,700 affordable units by the end of this year, which is really exciting. So in January 2024, Edmonton City Council approved the city's updated affordable housing strategy, which outlines actions the City of Edmonton is taking and will take to increase the overall supply of affordable housing in Edmonton. It builds upon the success of the previous strategy and affordable housing investment plan that I discussed on the previous slide. And the updated strategy contains 3 overarching goals shown on this slide, which are based on all the inputs to the updated strategy and are critical to meeting the housing need in Edmonton. Each goal is broken down into objectives, 7 in total, which are designed to help us achieve these goals, accompanied by 15 action-oriented tactics that each contains several key actions that we can take to achieve our objectives and goals. All of the details can be found in the implementation plan of the updated strategy, and this strategy framework is designed to inform our work plan going forward, while also allowing the city to adapt and be responsive to emerging conditions and opportunities, especially when funding isn't made available by other orders of government. And if you're interested in reading the full strategy, you can find that on the housing page website at edmonton.ca. But despite all of this momentum on affordable housing development, it's clear that the demand for housing and support services is outpacing available housing supply and further complicated by the drug poisoning crisis and mental health challenges that are on the rise, especially among those whose housing is precarious. As all orders of government work to play catch up on years of paused investment in affordable housing, the need continues to grow. And when it comes to responding to homelessness, historically, the City of Edmonton has played an adaptive role in this space by coordinating services and initiatives that connect unhoused Edmontonians to support and providing limited funding to Homeward Trust, the community-based entity and CBO in Edmonton, to deliver housing programs. More recently, like many major municipalities across the country, in response to growing rates of unsheltered homelessness, the COVID-19 pandemic, and corresponding need for basic amenities at a local level, the City of Edmonton's role in financial support for addressing housing and homelessness has grown significantly. In light of this expanded response and an auditor's report calling for more accountability and an evaluation of municipal efforts to address homelessness, the City of Edmonton utilized engagement and analysis from the Affordable Housing Strategy, including input from people with living experience, plus new evidence-based best practice and learnings from other cities to develop a homelessness and housing services plan. This plan is not only designed to fulfill the recommendations from the auditor that you can see on the screen, although in very small font, I apologize, but more importantly, to fulfill the commitment in the Affordable Housing Strategy to develop a corporate homelessness plan that ensures municipal resources are allocated to support the work of the sector and are effective and appropriate. So in July 2024, City Council approved the City of Edmonton's first homelessness and housing services plan, which was previously referred to as the corporate homelessness plan, that outlines the City of Edmonton's role and contributions to addressing homelessness over the next 4 years. The plan is built around 3 goals, 8 objectives, and 26 actions to organize the city's approach to achieving the city blend target of ending chronic and episodic homelessness in Edmonton. This plan works in tandem with efforts to increase affordable housing supply through actions under the city's updated affordable housing strategy, and is aligned with related plans and initiatives that support the city's community safety and well-being strategy. It also considers the analysis and recommendations from the Community Plan to Prevention Homelessness, the Government of Alberta's Action Plan on Homelessness, commitments made by the federal government, and the roles and priorities of community-based partners. Further, through the city's relationships with Indigenous governments, including a recent letter of intent on housing with the Confederacy of Treaty 6, the city is exploring how to work more effectively with First Nations on addressing homelessness in our communities. Recognizing the expansion of the city's role in this space over the last 5 years in response to a number of unique circumstances and a need for role clarity moving forward, the Homelessness and Housing Services Plan articulates the city's ability to make systems and policy changes in 4 distinct roles: as a coordinator, convener, advocate, and limited funder in housing and crisis response systems. So to develop the plan's goals, we conducted internal engagement with city staff across 27 business areas, in addition to Edmonton Police Service and Edmonton Public Library, and found that there are a number of city-funded initiatives or activities that address homelessness. Oh, previous slide, please. There you go. Slide 20, Heather. Thanks. Across 27 business areas, in addition to Edmonton Police Service and Edmonton Public Library, and found that there are a number of city-funded initiatives and activities that address homelessness and achieve different but related outcomes that either prevent homelessness, contribute to resolving homelessness, or respond to homelessness in a variety of ways that address the immediate needs of people in crisis and the corresponding public space impacts. Broadly, business areas who participated in this work both recognized the need for a corporate plan to organize the city's contributions, and were supportive of having a plan that results in enhanced coordination internally related to service delivery, budgets, reporting, and outcomes. Initiatives identified as part of the city's response to homelessness included both temporary and permanently funded activities spanning multiple business areas. So you'll note there are some activities on this slide, if you're familiar with Edmonton's landscape, that their temporary funding has come to an end and those initiatives have stopped running. So as a result of this engagement and all of the other inputs previously mentioned, the plan is centered around 3 goals, which I'm going to talk through and give some examples of. So the first goal of the plan is around homelessness prevention, and the goal is that the city contributes to an overall reduction of inflow into homelessness year over year. This will be achieved through 2 objectives and 6 actions, and some highlights include ongoing operational funding to Bissell Center's Community Bridge Program, which is a financial empowerment-focused case management program that can provide small interest-free loans to prevent eviction, utility disconnection, and foreclosure. Another action is to work with Homeward Trust to create a dedicated team to help rehouse people who are at risk of homelessness due to closures of problem properties. And this action is actually well underway, and I was able to get some stats before this presentation that there are 19 households who have been successfully rehoused by this team who otherwise may have faced housing loss as a result of the housing that they were living in being closed down due to it being unsafe. And so those 19 households consist of 60 unique individuals, including 30 children. Another is furthering the City of Edmonton's commitment and delivery of tenant empowerment courses. So the city works with partners to offer free courses that help renters become a great tenant. It's about building their knowledge and skills to help find and keep housing. And in 2024, 33 basic sessions and 9 certificate sessions of the tenant empowerment course were taken by 288 individuals. And I'm really excited to share that just recently, the Alberta Residential Landlord Association is recognizing the completion of this course as a reference for prospective tenants, meaning tenants can use it on applications for renting from organizations or housing providers who are ARLA members. More broadly, there are a number of actions in this plan around coordination, noting the rising rates of people on the by name list in search of housing support, and the role the city plays in distributing FCSS funding from the provincial government for preventative programs and services that can be tied to sustained housing outcomes. Over the next year, our team will look to build out a community of practice for homelessness prevention service providers in order to connect organizations with one another, with the ultimate goal of increasing accessibility for people seeking support. The second goal of the plan is around resolution. The city contributes to increased housing outcomes for people experiencing unsheltered homelessness year over year. This is achieved through 2 objectives and 8 actions, and some highlights include a goal of creating a dedicated funding stream for transitional or bridge housing programs to increase the number of short-term supportive housing options for folks who are unsheltered with complex health needs. An example of previous city support to expand this type of housing is the Bridge Healing Program, which I hope you are familiar with, and if you're not, you should definitely give it a Google. It connects folks who are in need of appropriate and affordable housing supports who are leaving hospital and otherwise don't have appropriate housing options. Another example includes exploring a coordinated deployment model for all city-funded frontline workers that respond to unsheltered homelessness to improve efficiency and ensure the appropriateness of services provided. This action is primarily focused on city-funded outreach and support teams. The city provides funding for both outreach and Indigenous-led outreach services to proactively address the needs of unsheltered people in order to reconnect them with the housing system and keep them safe. Not including anonymous contacts, their shared caseload right now is made up of 199 people, and the types of services provided vary on a case-by-case basis, focused on doing housing pre-work and crisis response to health needs. The Indigenous-led teams are a year old now and were funded through the community safety and well-being work with the City of Edmonton and have added tremendous value to the system insofar as providing people with cultural support and building relationships with neighboring First Nation communities in order to facilitate connections where a client might desire it. There are also other outreach teams funded by the city who work with this population and likely have overlap in who they are serving. Social workers out of the Edmonton Public Library, for example, or the work of the community outreach transit teams and Reach's 24/7 crisis diversion team. The goal of this work is to streamline access to services for folks who may be touching all of these teams at different times, share reporting, and ultimately secure better outcomes for folks who are often in public spaces seeking help. Finally, the third goal in the plan is around the homelessness response. So as long as homelessness persists, the city is committed to contributing to emergency responses that prioritize the safety and well-being of people experiencing homelessness. This goal recognizes that local governments, as noted in the city plan, are often first responders to people in crisis and is meant to identify the ways in which the municipality seeks to address that need. There are a number of actions underneath this goal, but some ones that I'll highlight for you include the review and update of policy C620, supporting vulnerable people during extreme weather events to ensure the safety of houseless and precariously housed people. So if you've been around our community, you know that there is a standing up of water stations in the summer to try and increase access to clean drinking water for folks, especially when it gets hot. And given the weather outside here today, it's quite cold and there are colder temperatures on the horizon. So I would just note that for any information you may need on the city's extreme weather response, you can visit edmonton.ca/winter safety response plan. And that page has up-to-date information on the city's winter shuttle service, a downloadable winter resource card, and other information about resources for folks seeking shelter and respite from the cold. This policy hasn't been updated since it was initially passed in 2019. So essentially this action is about taking the opportunity to review the efficacy of the implementation of the policy and ensure that it's still meeting the needs of vulnerable Edmontonians. We're excited to learn from what other jurisdictions are doing on this file and how other municipalities are trying to increase their the effectiveness of their responses during extreme weather, considering climate changes. And we're hopeful that we'll be able to complete this work within the next year. Another action is utilizing learnings from previous pilots and prototypes that advance individual wellness of people experiencing homelessness in partnership with community organizations and allied systems of care. For example, the wound care pop-up program in Butler Park every Tuesday is a pilot that will continue. And there are future efforts to work alongside people with living experience in program implementation in order to shift power structures and increase peer support. Finally, there is an objective that all City of Edmonton staff interacting with people experiencing homelessness have the appropriate training and access to resources that help them to feel safe and supported in their work. What we heard loud and clear through engagement with city staff is that folks in libraries, rec centers, and other public spaces want the tools to be helpful when engaging with Edmontonians who are looking for help. And the goal and the actions underneath this objective are designed to create a curriculum that's appropriate for different types of staff that can be rolled out across the city, that is trauma-informed and gives city staff the tools that they need to direct people to services where appropriate. In terms of the next steps of the plan, following it being passed in July, the city is starting to implement this work through an internal management table who will monitor progress on the actions. A performance measurement framework is being finalized and will be published in some way to report back to council and community on the status of implementation and impact of these actions in the plan in contributing to community effort to end homelessness. Thanks so much for listening. I'm going to grab a drink of water and then hopefully be able to answer your questions.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So I see some questions rolling in, but again, yeah, the Q&A function is there if you have any questions. We just have one comment. Someone said, thank you for the graph about historical investment. That really puts things into perspective. Yeah, it's definitely helpful to see the numbers. Okay, we have one question here. It says, can you elaborate on where encampments fit into the picture? As a citizen who understands that the supply of houses are not meeting the current need, it is hard to reconcile why a warm place to sleep is being removed. Are there enough alternatives while homes are being built?
That's a great question. So the City of Edmonton has worked with the government of Alberta quite closely over the last couple of years to ensure that there is a safe, warm spot for everybody who needs it. And so we remain assured by the GOA that there are enough emergency shelter spaces and short-term supportive housing options for folks who need it. I recognize that, of course, there are barriers for folks into accessing those spaces, and obviously that people have individual choice. And so I think that the city's position has mainly been that the preference is, of course, for folks to seek respite inside in -40, and that it is ultimately safer to be in a shelter connected to services than it is to be sleeping outside.
Don't see any other questions. If anyone has any, feel free to add them in. I'll just also put a plug now, I guess, on the slide here. We have housingmonth.ca. There's a full list of all the other events that are still happening for the rest of Housing Month. So there's still quite a few things, other lunch and learns. There's quite a few tours of the different supportive housing sites around Edmonton, which will be really unique experiences. So I encourage you to go check those out. Give a couple more minutes to see if anyone else has any questions. If not, I guess we can end early. Rachel, do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Only that if there is maybe something that you want to ask that you don't want to ask in a public forum, my email address is rachel.putt@edmonton.ca. And Rachel is spelt a little funny. So I don't know if there's a way, Heather, is there a way to communicate with folks who attended this call and share my contact info? Or is it on the invite?
Here, I think I can send, I should be able to put it in the chat here.
Perfect. Yeah. So I welcome conversations offline too. And I think there are a lot of people, it looks like there are folks on this call who are also from outside the City of Edmonton. And I'm always interested in learning what other municipalities and organizations are doing that's working. So just welcome an opportunity to connect.
Okay, I think we had a couple more questions come in. Is there any funding available for housing operators for operating and facilitation costs? All of the grants we can find that are available are for capital, but we would not be able to afford to operate an affordable housing building once it's built.
Great question. So in terms of operating costs, those are mostly funded through the government of Alberta. The City of Edmonton doesn't provide operating dollars for affordable housing, but we certainly recognize this as a gap. And so if you're interested in following up offline on sort of like the places that you've looked, maybe our team can help to connect you to some other resources.
So now it says, where can we find out more about the additional programs and meetups you shared? If you're talking about the Housing Month events, if you go to the URL there, that's on the slide, housingmonth.ca, that will list, I think it says when and where at the top of the web page, and you can see the list of events that are happening. For programs, maybe we mentioned a few, they're all on edmonton.ca, so you can go to the homepage and search the name of the one that you're looking for, and it will come up.
If you're asking about, and I wonder if whoever can ask that question, like, I don't know what the protocol here is, Heather, but if you're talking about sort of some of like the meetups and bringing together like homelessness prevention organizations, some of that work is underway and hasn't started yet as a part of the homelessness and housing services plan. So we haven't, because the plan was only approved in July, I believe, we haven't actually started convening folks. So feel free to shoot me an email directly after if you're interested in being a part of those tables, and I'm happy to facilitate connection to them.
All right, no more questions in the queue. I'll give it a couple more minutes if anyone thinks of anything. But yeah, if not, I've added Rachel's email into the chat there, so you can reach out to her that way. Okay, well, if that's it, we can end early. People can get their bit of their lunch back. Yeah, thanks again for everyone joining. And like I mentioned, check out the other Housing Month events before the month is over. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Oh, someone says, do we get a copy of the recording? Yes, all of the recordings for the Lunch and Learns will be on the housingmonth.ca website with the copy of the presentation. So you can view this one and any of the ones that happen this month. It'll probably be up in a little week. I think they're a little bit behind on getting them up there, but it will be eventually. So yeah, look out there.